Inside a spatial layer of the star tower, Luo Feng sat cross-legged and used a trace of divine power to form a perfectly spherical silver droplet. The droplet was not ordinary divine power. It carried traces of primal chaos laws and was infused with a faint life spirituality. After Luo Feng fully understood the essence of these silver droplets, he realized that, through the formless and intangible nature of his perfect divine body, his consciousness naturally merged into them during creation, making them feel like extensions of his own body. Each silver droplet could carry an extremely weak consciousness. Although their intelligence was minimal, they still possessed basic emotional reactions and instinctive behaviors such as joy, anger, and aggression. Most importantly, they could instinctively merge with one another after being created, just like natural biological structures assembling themselves. Luo Feng first created thousands of silver droplets using primal chaos divine power. Immediately, the droplets began to merge on their own, forming a unified structure. Once combined, they could transform into multiple weapon forms: silver blade light, silver sword light, long staff forms, nets, and more. Their power and speed reached a level comparable to Yanghu's unlimited godly body. Though their combat execution was relatively crude, he continued increasing their number. At 10,000 droplets, they merged into a liquid-like silver stream, and their overall strength experienced another jump. However, when he reached hundreds of thousands and then millions, no obvious qualitative change occurred. Luo Feng, however, became increasingly skilled, eventually able to create millions of droplets in a single motion. When the number reached 100 million, a second major transformation occurred. The droplets fused into a silver river suspended in space. Luo Feng tested its durability and found that even he needed some effort to disperse it, as it only trembled slightly before reforming. This level of power was already comparable to a newly advanced primal chaos realm cultivator in normal combat states, though still weaker than opponents burning divine power at their peak. Curious about its limits, Luo Feng continued increasing the number further: 200 million, 300 million, up to 1 billion droplets, but no new qualitative change appeared. He treated this process as cultivation, continuously deepening his understanding of life spirituality while improving his creation speed, eventually reaching the ability to generate hundreds of millions or even billions at once. Finally, when the total reached 108 trillion droplets, another profound transformation occurred. The scattered silver river completely unified into a perfect whole. A vast silver river hundreds of kilometers long appeared in the star tower space. Flowing with immense pressure and vitality, Luo Feng controlled it freely. With a thought, the silver river condensed into a silver blade light stretching tens of thousands of kilometers, then returned to a compact form. He sensed it could become large enough to cover the heavens or shrink to fit in his palm. More importantly, its strength, speed, and toughness had increased significantly again, now comparable to the casual attack of a standard primal chaos realm being. To understand its position, Luo Feng recalled the cultivation hierarchy of the primal chaos realm. Newly advanced cultivators were often weak and required time to stabilize their foundations. Most eventually reached the middle layer through accumulation. Those with unlimited godly bodies, once fully matured, naturally reached this level. Further refinement of techniques and accumulation of insights could elevate them to the upper tier. At the pinnacle stood beings like Marquis of Zhujiang, who had extremely deep accumulation. Above that was the true peak of primal chaos realm, where one had comprehended over 99% of a branch of the origin grade Tao, leaving only the final step toward godly king. Figures like Marquis Lu Yin belonged to this level. In normal circumstances, this was already the limit for most secondary and tertiary primal chaos realm forces. Only elite cultivators from the two ancient countries, possessing secret techniques surpassing godly king-level inheritances, could occasionally exceed this boundary. Against this backdrop, Luo Feng evaluated his creation. The 108 trillion droplet silver river, though only equivalent to a normal primal chaos realm combatant in raw strength, was fundamentally different because it was fully controlled by his own consciousness and spiritual will. He then tested its combat ability. With a thought, the silver river unleashed a vast silver blade strike that tore through multiple layers of space, forming a black spatial rift. He estimated this attack matched an ordinary primal chaos realm cultivator burning divine power at full intensity. and was roughly 2 to 3 times stronger than his previous full power strike. Still unsatisfied, Luo Feng attempted further stacking. He multiplied units, treating each 108 trillion droplet structure as a single combat module. Eventually, he transformed half of his godly body into this form, producing 1.2 billion units of silver blade light. However, no further fusion or qualitative evolution occurred beyond this stage, indicating a structural limit had been reached. At this point, a vast silver ocean filled the star tower space, with Luo Feng seated above it. He then analyzed the weaknesses of these silver droplets. First, they were extremely dependent on energy consumption and could not absorb energy directly from heaven and earth. They required primal chaos divine power, primal chaos crystals, or similar sources. Second, they were no longer pure divine power, meaning they could not activate weapon-type secret treasures. Third, they could not burn or overclock like normal divine power, so their peak output was fixed. However, Luo Feng judged that these weaknesses did not outweigh their advantages. Each unit of silverlight creature could execute the primal chaos blade at a level equivalent to an ordinary primal chaos realm being at full burning output. Because of his strong soul and spiritual will, he could simultaneously control multiple units. He first tested dual and small-scale multi-control, then refined his coordination. Since the primal chaos blade was a relatively simple technique, he quickly escalated control to hundreds of units. Eventually, 300 massive silver blade lights rose into the air simultaneously, each performing the primal chaos blade at full force. The combined attack was terrifying. 300 ordinary primal chaos realm level strikes merged together, forcibly tearing through dense spatial layers and causing large-scale space collapse. From this, Luo Feng derived a new body refinement path, the law of transformation. This path allowed divine power to be reshaped into countless forms, inheriting traits of different special lifeforms. It was unique to him due to his formless and intangible divine power structure. He realized this was not a single Tao, but a transitional method. The ultimate direction of body refinement was to understand the fundamental laws behind the strength of a godly body, eventually becoming an embodiment of the Tao itself. However, he was still only at the primal chaos realm and had not even fully grasped a single branch of the great Tao. So the ultimate stage remained distant. For now, transformation provided both combat versatility and insight into higher-order laws. After finishing cultivation, Luo Feng summoned Morosa into the Star Tower and proposed another sparring session. Morosa was surprised and hesitant, reminding Luo Feng that in their previous encounter, even Luo Feng's full-strength attack could not break his defense while he had completely suppressed his own power. He suggested waiting until Luo Feng's godly body reached its full limit before continuing their sparring, as the current gap in strength remained far too large. After Luo Feng decided to test his strength against Morosa, Morosa agreed but stated that he would not burn divine power or use primal chaos realm techniques, choosing to fight only with his body and using about 10% of his true strength. Luo Feng summoned 300 silver blade lights inside the Star Tower. Each blade was condensed from 180 billion silver droplets, compressed to a 10-meter size, making their destructive power highly concentrated. Luo Feng used the primal chaos blade, the first move of the world-breaking 9 blades, a technique he had developed after observing Morosa's destruction origin mysteries and comprehending a branch of the great Tao of destruction origin that he named the chop and split path. This path focused on absolute sharpness and the ability to split apart all obstacles. Since Luo Feng was a swordsman by nature, this branch perfectly suited him. The 300 blade lights merged into a terrifying silver river carrying a force comparable to 300 ordinary primal chaos realm cultivators burning their divine power for a desperate attack. The attack instantly destroyed layers of space and reached a power comparable to the final move of the world-breaking 9 blades. The world-breaking blade. Morosa was caught completely off guard and had to release his divine power to defend himself. He was blasted into the inner wall of the Star Tower, suffering severe injuries before quickly regenerating. Morosa was shocked that Luo Feng had reached a level comparable to his own full power attack while burning divine power, despite having only recently entered the primal chaos realm, whereas Morosa had cultivated there for more than 5 eras. Luo Feng reminded him that true cultivation required comprehension and research, something Morosa had never needed as a naturally born sector beast. Forced to become serious, Morosa displayed his true abilities. His body transformed into a dark abyss that twisted and shattered the surrounding void, destroying and consuming the force of Luo Feng's blade attack. Although the 300 blade lights were immensely powerful, most of their strength was neutralized, demonstrating that technique power alone was insufficient and that the depth of one's realm was equally important. Morosa explained that high-level primal chaos realm techniques possessed profound mysteries that could redirect, dissolve, or avoid attacks. He admitted that his own realm was still far below a godly king and likely inferior to the deeply experienced Marquis Zhu Zhang. Luo Feng understood this, acknowledging that his current blade lights would struggle to strike someone like Marquis Zhu Zhang, who could exist between reality and illusion, and that he likely could not even touch the more powerful Marquis Lu Yin. Morosa also admitted that he was not confident in defeating Marquis Lu Yin, whose rumored ability to become a world-ending disaster was far beyond him. Luo Feng then revealed that his current strength came from a self-created transformation secret technique based on the ability of formless and intangible. Unlike sector beasts, which naturally inherited their understanding of destruction, cultivators could study and create their own paths. His newly developed law of transformation greatly strengthened his divine body, and its current state was only the beginning. Luo Feng believed that while enemies might evade or weaken 300 blade lights, they would have a much harder time facing 1,000 or even 3,000 blades. A massive increase in quantity could create a qualitative transformation, producing overwhelming destructive force capable of splitting even a braided cage and annihilating everything in its path. Morosa understood the terrifying implications of such absolute destructive power. As a being closely connected to the great Tao of destruction origin, he knew that at its highest level, destruction could shatter space-time, worlds, causality, and all existence. However, even a peak sector beast that fully comprehended the great Tao of destruction origin did not dare to challenge the ancient countries, proving how terrifying the foundations of those civilizations were. This also strengthened Morosa's willingness to follow Luo Feng as a guest elder of Emperor Chu's lineage in the flame-wind ancient country. Because the stronger Luo Feng became, the safer Morosa would be. Luo Feng explained that he used the life origin lineage to perfect his law of transformation and the destruction origin lineage to unleash his blade techniques. His current limit of controlling 300 blades relied heavily on his powerful perfect divine body, his strong soul, and his godly king-level spiritual will. As his divine body, soul, realm, and mastery improved, he would be able to control many more blades with less consumption of heart force. Both Luo Feng and Morosa recognized that the law of transformation was still only in its earliest stage. Luo Feng had collected 6 kinds of primal chaos layer creatures but had only researched one of them. His future goal was to study many forms, combine their strengths, and even research naturally powerful primal chaos realm creatures captured by great powers such as the flame-wind ancient country. Luo Feng saw a future path of using the law of transformation to achieve breaking laws with absolute force, overwhelming all techniques through pure power and perhaps even splitting open the mysterious braided cage during his primal chaos realm stage. Although he knew that even some ancient godly kings had failed to accomplish such a feat. After sending Morosa away, Luo Feng entered another period of secluded cultivation, as the early primal chaos realm was a time of rapid improvement. Morosa, however, felt uneasy because Luo Feng had already reached a point where he could likely defeat him without relying on the secret technique of willpower. Since Morosa lacked the ability to study and create techniques like a cultivator, he realized that he needed to accelerate his growth by devouring powerful divine bodies and treasures. Though obtaining such resources would require Luo Feng's assistance. Feeling frustrated, Morosa went looking for food and encountered Moyu Qingyan, who happily announced that he had finally comprehended all 10 fundamental laws after more than 30 years of training. Morosa dismissed the achievement as insignificant compared to the strength of himself and Luo Feng. But inwardly he was pleased that the foolish youngster had finally made a breakthrough, feeling that teaching another person was far more exhausting than his own cultivation. Inside the Star Tower, Luo Feng successfully mastered the second type among the 6 primal chaos layer creatures he had collected. He transformed his primal chaos divine power into countless tiny black octodecahedrons, each containing patterns of the primal chaos laws and possessing its own life spirituality. after creating 180 trillion black octodecahedrons and combining them together. He achieved a perfect form resembling a dark, immovable mountain. Luo Feng tested this new transformation method using 10 silver blade lights. But the black mountain effortlessly absorbed the impact and remained completely unmoved. Through repeated experiments, he discovered that compared to his first transformation method, the silver droplet transformation method, the new black octodecahedron form had only 30% of the offensive power and 20% of the movement speed. But its defensive capability was 9 times stronger, and it possessed the ability to absorb enemy attacks and return the force back. Luo Feng named his first transformation method the Galaxy transformation method because the countless silver droplets formed a vast silver river. While the second was named the Black Abyss transformation method because each black octodecahedron contained internal space capable of absorbing and counter-attacking force. The Black Abyss form could also shrink into a protective black robe covering his body. Combined with the star tower maintaining primal chaotic space internally and the endless silver galaxy surrounding him, Luo Feng believed that even using only 10% of his perfect divine body's divine power to maintain this form would make him extremely difficult to harm. He planned to continue researching the remaining 4 transformation methods before entering the primal chaos layer again to collect more creatures. Believing that by studying dozens or even hundreds of primal chaos layer creatures, he could accumulate enough experience to eventually create the most perfect divine body suited for himself. After leaving seclusion, Luo Feng relaxed and asked Morosa to prepare food. Morosa informed him that Moyu Qingyan had finally comprehended the 10 fundamental laws and broken through to become a true god of void space. Luo Feng joked that with Morosa personally teaching him for so long, Moyu Qingyan's comprehension was not exceptional. Although Morosa admitted that compared with Luo Feng's terrifying talent, Moyu Qingyan appeared very ordinary. Morosa asked whether Luo Feng intended to accept Moyu Qingyan as a disciple. And Luo Feng explained that mastering the 10 fundamental laws was only the first test, while the more important test was his character during more than 30 years of following them. During this period, Moyu Qingyan remained humble, cautious, never abused Luo Feng's reputation for personal gain, and had stayed loyal even when he received no guidance and faced many dangers. Among the 3 Moyu brothers, Luo Feng had always considered him the most steadfast. Luo Feng noticed that Morosa had developed a close bond with Moyu Qingyan and suggested that Morosa become his master. But although tempted, Morosa refused because he needed to keep his true identity as a sector beast hidden and believed his future status would never be suitable for a disciple seeking great achievements. Whereas Luo Feng's identity as a normal cultivator and his future position as a guest elder of the Flamewind ancient country would provide Moyu Qingyan with a much brighter path. Luo Feng realized that Morosa was sincerely considering Moyu Qingyan's future and reflected on how the naturally destructive sector beasts, after being enslaved and having their violent nature suppressed, could develop emotions, relationships, and a different path of existence. Believing that although enslavement seemed like a loss of freedom, it might actually be the opportunity for sector beasts to escape their predetermined fate of destruction. In the end, Luo Feng agreed to accept Moyu Qingyan as his disciple, making Morosa extremely happy, and the ceremony became Luo Feng's first disciple acceptance event in the land of origin. Attended by many influential figures from Zhujiang Primal Chaos Prefecture, including members of the Moyu family, General Yuwu, General Yang Hu, and many eternal true gods. Moyu Hu was overjoyed because the opportunity he had exchanged his precious treasure and Luo Feng's favor for had ultimately allowed his son to become the disciple of someone likely to reach the primal chaos realm. While Moyu Lai Feng felt both happiness and regret, knowing he once had the same opportunity but had abandoned it. Many powerful figures, including the Dream Flower Tower Master, envied Moyu Qingyan because Luo Feng had accepted very few people around him, with only Morosa as his servant and Moyu Qingyan as his sole disciple. During the solemn ceremony, Moyu Qingyan formally knelt and acknowledged Luo Feng as his master, in the land of origin. The relationship between master and disciple was considered more important than family because a master provided teachings, cultivation resources, treasures, and guidance throughout a disciple's path. And betraying such a relationship would make a cultivator despised and untrusted by everyone. After becoming Luo Feng's disciple, Moyu Qingyan stood beside him while silently feeling gratitude toward Morosa. who had personally taught him for more than 30 years, though he kept his wish to acknowledge Morosa as his master hidden in his heart. The event of Luo Feng accepting a disciple was only a small incident amid the ongoing conflict between the two great primal chaos prefectures. As time passed and an era elapsed, the Marquis of Zhujiang continued searching for powerful allies capable of opposing Marquis Lu Yin but failed to gain support from any major expert. The Tianji ice field in the Land of Origin is an enormous frozen expanse comparable in scale to the entire flame-wind ancient country. Yet due to its extreme cold and harsh survival conditions, the population of cultivators is extremely sparse, less than 1% of that in the flame-wind ancient country, and unlike structured kingdoms elsewhere. It has no unified nations but is divided among scattered powers with cultivators mainly concentrated in fortified cities. The Marquis of Zhujiang traveled to Defying City, a massive city carved entirely from ice with a population far exceeding that of Huyang City. Where only cities can sustain large numbers of cultivators due to the lethal environment outside. Defying City is ruled by Great Saint Defying, a peak primal chaos realm expert comparable to Marquis Lu Yin, who resides in a grand cave mansion at the city center and governs millions of cultivators while remaining independent of any kingdom. Choosing a solitary and free existence. Once an honorary disciple under an emperor of the flame-wind ancient country, he left due to overwhelming internal competition and is known for his unrestrained personality and refusal to join any faction. When the Marquis of Zhujiang requested his assistance against Marquis Lu Yin, Defying pragmatically refused, explaining that no primal chaos realm cultivator would risk their life without sufficient compensation, as those at this level had endured countless hardships and would not gamble their lives for others. He added that only godly king-level weapons or equivalent treasures could attract such allies, which Zhujiang did not possess, and emphasized that Lu Yin was a ruthless and dominant existence who might break through at any time, making the conflict too costly and unattractive. Defying further mocked the situation, noting that Zhujiang was unwilling to sacrifice large portions of his territory as payment, and concluded that the conflict was not worth the cost for any external powerhouse, leaving Zhujiang with no choice but to drink in frustration, realizing he could not recruit even a single primal chaos realm ally. Meanwhile, outside Huyang City, Marquis Lu Yin manifests through a bloodflame avatar and observes the situation. He deduces that after the previous confrontation in Huyang City, Zhujiang must understand he cannot defeat Lu Yin's eternal-level army, and thus has been traveling to seek reinforcements. However, Lu Yin remains confident that Zhujiang has likely failed to recruit any significant help. Lu Yin believes the conflict has dragged on for an entire era, and that Zhujiang should now recognize reality. Even if reinforcements were somehow obtained, Lu Yin is prepared to continue the war without hesitation. He also considers the possibility that Zhujiang may simply abandon his fiefdom entirely out of despair. Confident in his dominance, Lu Yin orders his son Lu Yinyan to begin final preparations for war. He instructs him to summon senior sect brothers and sisters, as well as the envoys of the Snow Realm, to prepare for a coordinated assault. Lu Yinyan is enthusiastic, believing victory is already decided. Inside Huyang City, Lu Yinyan communicates with his allies, declaring that the conflict between the two primal chaos states is nearing its conclusion. He reports that his father expects Zhujiang to concede voluntarily due to inferiority. His senior sect members and the Snow Realm envoys agree to assist without hesitation and move quickly to the battlefield. Lu Yinyan becomes excited and confident, believing that his side will soon overwhelm Zhu Yang's forces. He remarks that he will prepare food for his senior brothers and sisters, revealing that he is accustomed to using living cultivators as resources. His subordinate, the Black Armor General, understands this implication and eagerly anticipates it. Lu Yinyan projects a model of Huyang City and selects Fenji District, which contains approximately 100 billion cultivators. He designates this entire population as blood food for his allies from the Snow Realm. This reflects the cultivation practices of the Snow Realm, particularly those following the bloodline of Bloodpath, which relies on harvesting living beings for cultivation resources. He then departs the Heart Shadow sect residence together with the envoys of the Snow Realm, heading toward Fenji District. Although a single envoy of the Snow Realm is not strong enough to defeat an entire army formation, It is sufficient to carry out large-scale capture operations and can retreat safely even against primal Chaos Realm opposition. The Envoy of the Snow Realm arrives above Fenji district, where nearly all cultivators are hiding due to fear of the ongoing conflict between major factions. The city is under layered formations from both the City Lord's mansion and the Heartshadow sect, creating a tense and unstable environment. Ordinary cultivators can only wait helplessly, expecting whichever side wins will impose residence fees and control. The Envoy of the Snow Realm then reveals its intent: to harvest the entire Fenji district's population as blood food. It extends a massive snow-white hand that expands to cover the entire sky above the district, preparing to seize roughly 100 billion beings at once. This action is immediately detected by multiple powerful observers, including Yuwu, Emperor Chu Yu of Flame Wind Pavilion, and both Luo Feng and Morosa, who are at primal chaos overlord level. Morosa is shocked by the scale of the act, while Luo Feng recognizes that the Envoy is following the Snow Realm's bloodline of blood cultivation system, which involves collecting living beings for long-term blood harvesting. Luo Feng understands that such blood food is used to cultivate and refine the bloodline of blood. Though he notes that even collecting blood directly could suffice for cultivation, mass capture is done for convenience, despite causing prolonged suffering to the victims. As the giant palm descends and the entire Fenji district faces annihilation, despair spreads among the 100 billion cultivators, who realize they cannot resist and are completely powerless against the formation-breaking force of the Envoy. At the critical moment, a sudden strike emerges from the void, directly piercing through the chest of the Envoy of the Snow Realm and interrupting the impending mass capture. After completing the transformation method, Luo Feng's divine body reached an extreme level of refinement, effectively turning his physical form into a weapon of overwhelming lethality. This allowed him to move through space and directly strike the Envoy of the Snow Realm, piercing its chest with a single hand. Even Luo Feng himself was surprised by how easily it was destroyed, questioning whether the Envoy was truly as strong as its reputation suggested. The Envoy of the Snow Realm was widely known in the outside world as a mechanical treasure comparable to primal Chaos Realm weapon secret treasures, famous for its defensive strength. However, Luo Feng's direct observation after penetration led him to a more precise evaluation. He determined that its materials ranked at the lower end among primal Chaos Realm treasures, and its overall structural stability was even worse due to its mechanical assembly. While eternal true gods could not break it, relatively strong primal Chaos Realm cultivators could damage it without difficulty. Despite its weaknesses, Luo Feng also recognized its strategic value. Its complexity allowed numerous weak cultivators to combine their strength into a single combat entity, compensating for individual weakness with coordinated output. Based on his knowledge inherited from his master, the mountain-sitting guest, Luo Feng estimated the Envoy of the Snow Realm to be worth around 200 million cosmic sand, aligning with ordinary primal Chaos Realm weapon-level treasures. When his fingers penetrated the core structure, Luo Feng immediately gained access to the internal control system of the Envoy. Inside, he detected its full operational hierarchy: 1 leader, Lu Yinyan, 36 assisting eternal true gods, and 49,000 void true gods. At that moment, all manipulators inside were overwhelmed by fear, fully aware that their life and death now rested in Luo Feng's hands. He specifically sensed a strong blood aura from Lu Yinyan and the 36 eternal true gods. They were direct disciples of the ancestral god of the Snow Realm and had cultivated a blood dharma lineage that required large-scale consumption of blood food, a brutal resource system used to enhance cultivation. In contrast, the 49,000 void true gods did not possess such inheritance rights and had not yet been elevated to that level of cultivation privilege, meaning they lacked the blood-marked aura and were essentially lower-tier labor force. Luo Feng also understood the underlying structure of the Snow Realm system. High cultivation required enormous resources, and blood food consumption was already so excessive among higher ranks that it was strictly rationed. Lower-level void true gods were therefore excluded from core inheritance and, in some cases, could even become blood food themselves if they failed or were deemed expendable. Despite this, Luo Feng showed no intent to kill the 49,000 void true gods. He judged them as victims of circumstance, born into an environment with no real freedom or escape. Instead, He expelled them from the Envoy and allowed them to scatter, while selectively eliminating only the 36 eternal true gods through a single wave of invisible force. Lu Yinyan was captured alive in his palm. After stabilizing control of the situation, Luo Feng secured the damaged Envoy of the Snow Realm itself. Even though its chest structure had been pierced, he determined it could be repaired and still retain significant resale value. Given its estimated worth of roughly 2 billion cosmic sand, he considered it worth keeping rather than discarding. At the same time, Lu Yinyan, held in his palm, stared up in disbelief at Luo Feng's black-robed figure. He could not accept that Luo Feng had already stepped into the primal chaos realm, as only such a level could so effortlessly destroy an envoy-level construct and annihilate eternal true gods. Outside, the entire Fenji district witnessed the scene. Luo Feng stood in the sky holding Lu Yinyan in one hand, fully exposed to public view. The shock spread rapidly among powerful cultivators stationed nearby. Figures such as General Yu Wu, General Yan Hu, and others in the city lord's mansion were shaken, realizing that Luo Feng had truly advanced into the primal chaos realm. Even those who previously considered him a rising eternal true god now had to completely reassess his status. The Dream Flower Tower Master and the Lord of Huyang City also began speculating whether Luo Feng had just broken through or had been hiding his cultivation all along. Meanwhile, Moyu Qingyan was stunned, while Morosa observed her reaction with quiet amusement, confirming the shift in power hierarchy. At a broader level, billions of beings in Fenji district reacted with relief and gratitude. Entire clans, families, sects, and disciples realized they had narrowly escaped annihilation. Many of them did not even know Luo Feng's identity before, but now saw him as their savior. The emotional impact was massive. Survival replaced despair, and gratitude replaced fear. However, among the 49,000 void true gods released, reactions were fragmented. Some immediately realized they were effectively freed and intended never to return to the Snow Realm. Others remained uncertain, still psychologically bound by loyalty or fear. A portion still hoped to be rescued or reintegrated, while others felt resentment, loss, or a desire for revenge. Their fates had been fundamentally altered in an instant. The system of the Snow Realm itself was revealed in more depth through their reactions. It was ruled by extreme control, with the ancestral god of the Snow Realm distributing a drop of blood inheritance to eternal true gods. This blood forced absolute loyalty, ensuring that the upper ranks could never betray the system. Thus, while lower levels suffered chaos and resentment, the upper structure remained rigidly loyal. In parallel, Emperor Chu Yu of the Flame Wind ancient country observed the situation from the Flame Wind Pavilion. He immediately recognized Luo Feng's breakthrough and saw a strategic opportunity to recruit him into the Flame Wind ancient country. However, he also became cautious, urgently transmitting a warning not to kill Lu Yinyan. He emphasized that in a military stalemate between major powers, killing such a figure would trigger retaliation from Marquis Lu Yin due to reputation and face. Even if the actual loss was not strategically catastrophic, Lu Yinyan himself, realizing his situation, desperately pleaded for mercy. He invoked both his father, Marquis Lu Yin, and his master, the ancestral god of the Snow Realm, hoping these identities would deter Luo Feng. However, his survival depended entirely on whether Luo Feng valued political consequences enough to restrain himself. Emperor Chu Yu, increasingly anxious, reinforced his warning through transmission, explaining that even though Luo Feng was powerful, the Flame Wind ancient country would not interfere in conflicts between primal chaos realm cultivators or their affiliated elders. He also noted that even imperial clan descendants sometimes died in such conflicts, meaning Luo Feng would be on his own if he acted. Simultaneously, Marquis Zhu Zhang also transmitted advice, acknowledging Luo Feng's breakthrough but urging restraint. He explained that the gap between primal chaos realm cultivators was still vast, and that he himself intended to resolve the conflict directly with Marquis Lu Yin rather than escalate it. He advised Luo Feng to withdraw and continue cultivating instead of intervening in a war-level confrontation. Luo Feng understood these warnings but did not immediately respond. Instead, he observed the situation carefully, noting the distant manifestation of a blood-red energy projection forming in the sky. This projection condensed into a dark red armored figure representing the will of Marquis Lu Yin. The projection coldly demanded three things: release Lu Yinyan, Return the envoy of the Snow Realm, and pay 10 billion cosmic sand as compensation. Only then would Luo Feng be spared. The tone was indifferent and absolute, implying that Luo Feng's life could be taken without difficulty if he resisted. Luo Feng responded calmly, questioning the confidence behind the threat. The armored figure, unmoved, declared that Luo Feng was free to try resisting, implying overwhelming superiority. Without further hesitation, Luo Feng crushed Lu Yinyan in his palm, erasing him instantly despite the presence of both Emperor Chu Yu and Marquis Zhu Zhang observing the situation. The act shocked all observers, as it directly violated the expectations of restraint in such a politically sensitive confrontation. Immediately afterward, Luo Feng turned his attention to the dark red armored projection and prepared to confront it head-on, signaling that he would not retreat even in the face of a primal Chaos Realm adversary.